atmosphere, and oceans, just like the Earth does. And the Earth was covered in water. The reptilians spent many thousands of years searching for the refugees because they wanted to absorb all of humanity. And they found the colonies here in the solar system, and they sent in an ice comet to destroy it. And the ice comet, make a very long story short, was very big at the time, and it came into our solar system. It caused the planet Uranus to go off of its axis and spin on north to south instead of east to west, as all planets do. And Uranus is the only known planet anywhere that still spins north to south. And then the ice comet continued on, and as it got between the positions of the gravitational pull of Jupiter, Maldek, and our Sun, it caused Maldek to explode into many different pieces, which we now have as the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. And as it got close to Mars, the force of the planet pulled the atmosphere and most of the oceans off of Mars, creating the planet we now see today. And as it came close to our planet, the Earth, which was a water world, the spin of the ice comet and the Earth around each other very quickly and for a period of time caused the oceans to separate and actually be pulled off of the planet, creating land exposed. The spin created polar ice caps because of the water being pulled and frozen. And then the Earth and the ice comet switched positions so that the ice comet became the second planet in our solar system captured by the Sun, and the Earth was pushed out into third position and became more inhabitable. And the second planet, the ice comet, became Venus, which, being closer to the Sun, the heat caused the ice to evaporate and melt and created the clouds that we now see around Venus. And back in the 1980s, before the Soviet Union collapsed, the Soviets sent a space probe to Venus with a special camera that could survive the intense heat as it descended below the cloud cover. And when it descended below the cloud cover, the cameras picked up 7 domed areas on the surface of Venus, which were transmitted back to the Soviet Union. And in fact, this was reported on the front page of New York Times and LA Times at the time. And so there was this whole article that was written that stated how they were 7 dome-shaped, perfectly shaped objects on the surface of Venus, and then went on and on about it. And the very last paragraph said that NASA had determined that these were natural formations. Now, if you know about reptilian culture, which I write about in Blue Blood book, you know that there is a hierarchy of 7 different races, each one having a specific function, and they do not mix together. And so if you have a colony of reptilians on a planet, it makes sense to me that they would be in several or separated domed areas, which we have seen now from the Soviet photographs.
Have you seen those photographs?
I have seen those photographs. Many years ago, I was very much questioned by the government about Soviet satellite photographs. That's a whole other story, but they were U.S. government, very interested in what the Soviets found out. And that's, again, another whole category. I could go on for weeks about what went on in the Soviet Union. But as far as the Earth is concerned, it was now colonizable because land masses had appeared, and so the reptilians drove another object into our solar system and parked it around the Earth for colonization, and we now call that the moon. And the moon, as you know, is the only object in space that does not spin. Its orbit, only one side faces the Earth at all times. That's why it has a light side and a dark side, and we never see the dark side. It's because it's a ship parked in orbit. And when they brought the moon rocks back to the Earth in the late 60s and early 70s, it was determined that the rock from the moon did not come from the solar system. It's not from here.
You see, I love it that you're opening other doors for me, because the moon is an area or an object, no pun intended, that we always like to discuss here. So, in your opinion, the moon is an artificial object that was moved here when this all happened. Yeah. With what purpose? Is it monitoring, or why is it there?
Well, it was brought here for colonization, and that is when the reptilians colonized the Earth in a continent known, we call it now Lemuria. Mm-hmm. And they were reptilian, androgynous beings, and they colonized the Earth first, and that's why the reptilians feel the Earth is their planet, because they were here first, and that's the truth.
What happened to Lemuria and Atlantis?
Well, many eons later, the human refugees from Mars and other areas colonized the Earth in Atlantis. And when you have reptiles and mammals living in the same place, they do not get along. And so there were many, many wars, many, many destructions, and ultimately the Atlanteans, with their geomagnetic weapons, caused Lemuria to sink into the ocean and created what's left is Australia, New Zealand, the South Pacific, Japan, the Philippines, even the west coast of California, west of the San Andreas Fault Line, was part of Lemuria. The redwood forest up north is part of what was Lemuria. So all of these remnants were here, and when the reptilians sank, many of them went into the inner earth or under the crust of the earth for safety reasons, and that began the legend later on of hell under the earth or demons living under the earth. That's where that came from. Mm-hmm. And it was only after the Atlanteans destroyed themselves many millennia later that the reptilians underground thought, okay, now we can come back up to the surface. But so much time had passed that the humans would not accept their appearance because they looked demonic. And
is it true, and I mean, just to interject, is it true that they liked it, that inner earth or underground was demonized as hell, if you want to call it that way, because that way they would not be bothered underground, and they liked it that way?
Well, I don't know. I don't know if they liked it that way. I only know that part of their colonization process was to prepare the planet for assimilation into the Draco Empire. And that is what they have felt a compelled need to do. And so that is why they wanted to retake the surface, but in order to do so, they had to start a hybridization project so that they could be accepted in some way. And that's where shape-shifting came in, because when they mixed 50-50 genetics, human and reptilian and mammalian, the body could shift from one to the other. And that's the story of how shapeshifters began on the planet.
And we have Caucasoid, Mongoloid, and Negroid. How did these races come to be?
From the different reptilian races that donated genetics to these particular cultures. And when you go back in the Bible and you look at Genesis, and what does it say in Genesis? Let us create man in our image. Always it's plural when referring to God. If it's a singular God, why is he talking in the plural? See? And
True.
so, and the story, the allegorical story of the creation of Eve from the rib of Adam, that really is about taking an androgynous reptilian body and separating it into male and female components by adding mammalian genetics. And that's why when you observe a human fetus gestation in the womb, for the first few weeks, it's reptilian androgynous. And only after several weeks do mammalian characteristics start to form. And that's because the genetic code is following the sequence in which it developed. It was reptilian body first, and mammalian genetics were added afterwards. And then we can see this in the womb.
Why the genetic manipulation? Why the mixture between humans and reptilian?
That was so that the human beings would accept reptilian overlords, so that they would actually be part of them. It was also part of a peace process, which I write about in Blue Blood, where before Lemuria and Atlantis were destroyed, a peace process was developed where they decided to create a blending of the two races or species in order to create a third to show unity between them. But of course, it was a miserable failure.
Of course. And all this mind control, let me just fast forward a little bit. We all know the digital boxes that our nice government is giving to all of us so that we could be entertained.
Yes.
What's your take behind the digital boxes and the digital signal in our TVs?
Well, of course, it is to monitor. Even when you turn your television off, it can still watch you.
Yes.
And even when you unplug your computer, it still can watch and monitor you. And this is something that's been going on for quite a long period of time. And in order to now consolidate it and unify it across the field, they, of course, destroyed the signal so that you can only watch television if you have this digital service. They're doing this everywhere.
What are they using the analog signal for now?
Well, that signal is very, let's say, more difficult to manipulate. And so they use it for their own inner communications amongst themselves.
This is just an important thing to ask you. This is in your blog right now, and let me just talking about mind control. I'm 10 minutes away from the Tucson massacre. Just as a matter of disclosure, my wife was across the street having breakfast with our daughter when this whole thing started, and she saw the helicopters and the ambulance come in. Vigilante activation. Tell me what you think happened here, Steward.
Well, did you see the picture of this Jared Loughner when he was in the photograph of him in the prison?
And the first thing I said to myself was, he is a suspect until he's proven guilty. Why is he being shaved if he's in detention?
Yeah. Why did they shave him and make that weird expression on his face for CNN and Fox and all the other news services to show? Because he looks like an alien being, doesn't he?
Yeah.
He looks like something from a sci-fi movie, and he's supposed to look weird and scary.
Right.
And he is now a conspiracy theorist who has gone bad and is an example to the world of what happens when you believe in conspiracy theories. You see? Look at him. He looks not even human being. And if you look at his eyes, you can see one eye is bigger than the other eye. And that is a telltale sign of a deeply programmed person. In fact, if you look at many of the media entertainment icons there on television and in movies, you'll notice that one eye looks different than the other. It's not completely symmetrical. That's a sign of a programmed person, deeply programmed person who is in an activated state.
And I like to tell people that I didn't jump to any conclusions. First of all, because I'm here, and the Congresswoman happens to be my Congresswoman in the area. She was born on the 8th. She is the representative for District 8, and she was shot on the 8th.
Yes.
Is there a correlation here, Steward?
Absolutely. And in fact, if you know the numerology or the astronumerology of all of this, it was a purposeful action so to trigger people with this vigilante programming. And what happened after that shooting? Well, in the last week or so, how many police officers across the country have been shot?
Yes, a lot.
Many. This triggered a chain reaction, activated vigilante programmed people across the country. And that's going to get worse. And in fact, it may have even triggered the explosion in Moscow airport. So unfortunately, we're going to see a lot of this in 2011. 2011 is a year, what I call an everything year. That means everything will happen and can happen. And that includes every program function out there will be opened up.
Just in the last few weeks of January, Steward, we've seen more news than we've seen probably in years before.
That's right, and it's only January.
Right.
So, fasten your seatbelts because it's going to be a very rough ride this year in many categories.
Another aspect I found interesting